self-control. Confident living rights every wrong.
I'm Mike Costello, and I'd like to talk to you for the next few minutes about self-confidence. Psychologists and sociologists tell us that one of the greatest difficulties that we have as a people is building our own self-confidence and having the self-esteem that we need. If we aren't self-confident and if we lack self-esteem, we are robbed of the joy and happiness that we can have in our life experience. Self-confidence is an essential part of being a dynamic person. In our religious belief, we believe that we live in our minds and not in the world. That means that we live within the thought processes of our mind dynamic as much or more than we live in the outer world. And as we build self-confidence, or we lack self-confidence, our thought processes change. And as our thought processes change, the quality of our lives change. I'd like to share with you some techniques for building self-confidence. And as we build our self-confidence, we connect ourselves more fully with that which is divine. A lot of people in religious circles today believe that self-confidence or self-reliance takes away from the reliance that we have historically had upon God or the divine influences in our life. That's not at all true. New thought teaches us that the dynamic and the importance of our own responsibility for our life is fundamental to our religious happiness. And so as we become stronger persons, as we become more self-reliant, more self-confident, and develop our own self-esteem, we are actually glorifying the presence of God because we are the greatest creation of God. How can we build self-confidence? How can we chip away at the negative thinking that brings us low self-esteem? One of the things that we can do to begin this process or to evaluate the process of our own level of self-confidence or self-esteem is to look at the way that we think. How do you think of yourself? How do you think of others? Do you accept yourself as worthy, as being the person who could receive success and be successful, the person whom you admire? Is that a part of your thought process, or do you think of yourself in negative and limiting ways? Begin the process of thinking of yourself as worthy and equal to everyone else. We are all God's children. We are all equal. At different points in time, circumstances and situations present themselves in our lives, in your life and in my life. But we always have the ability to know that we are children of God, imbued with a power and an authority to overcome circumstances and situations. As we build upon our self-confidence, we need to eliminate the fear that we have of failure. As children, many of us were taught that we ought never to fail, that we ought always to succeed. And certainly in our thought process, we believe that we are successful, that we can succeed, that we will be guided in right ways and directions. But the reality is that from time to time, we will have seeming failures in our lives. And what we need to do is to eliminate the fear of failure. In our church, we talk about fear often, and we define those four letters, F-E-A-R, as false evidence appearing real. False evidence appearing real. Failure is not something that we need to avoid. It is something that will visit all of us. And as we fail in our life experiences, it tells us that there's another direction in which to go. So we need to lay aside our fear of failure. We don't focus on our failures, but we know that there will be times in our lives when we'll reach dead-end streets, when relationships will end, when jobs will be lost, when illness will come, when limit and lack visit us. And those are the very times that we need to build upon our self-confidence and give up the fear, the false evidence appearing real, because none of the failures of life are forever. Everything that we experience in life is passing and transient. We need to reject the rejection complex. So often we want to have the acceptance of the people around us. We begin as children by wanting to be accepted by our parents, accepted by those around us. But the reality is that as we move through the pilgrimage of life, as we experience our daily existence, we are going to be rejected. Others are going to have judgments about us that are not true, and if we begin to believe everything that people say about us that is negative, we begin to buy into the rejection complex. So we invite you to reject the idea of rejection by others and put aside the importance that you feel about others in their judgment of you. Surround yourself with people who are positive and uplifting. That may mean that you have to make a new circle of friends. That may even mean that you have to change a relationship that you're in. It may in some cases mean that you can't and shouldn't have as much direct contact with your parents or with your old friends as you have had in the past, because if they are the people who are telling you that you are limited, that you cannot succeed, that you are less than adequate in life, they are the people that you want to stay away from until you build the strength of your own self-confidence, until you're able to put aside the judgment of others. So surround yourself with positive people. Seek out a circle of friends who are going to support you and encourage you in the self-confidence and self-esteem that you need to have. Censor your negative thoughts. Negative thoughts in mind become self-fulfilling prophecies. If we believe that we're not going to find a successful relationship, if we believe that we're going to get sick, if we begin to build upon the negatives in our life and believe them to be true, they will become self-fulfilling, because as we think, so we create. And the creative force of thought will bring into your life experience and into my life experience exactly what we create. So we must censor the negative influences in our lives. We need to be self-directed, and in doing that in a religious or spiritual sense, regardless of your church or your faith tradition. We're not talking about changing what you believe in terms of your denomination or your church. What we are talking about is changing the way that you think about your relationship to other people and your relationship to that which is divine, to the power and grace of God. Be self-directed. Look inside yourself for the guidance and the direction that you need to have for the solutions in your life. And the solutions will come because you have the ability to be guided and directed. We believe, as we said earlier, in the dynamic power of mind. Human mind connected to divine mind. And when divine mind is fully connected, that is, the divine mind of God, is fully connected to my mind and your mind, then we have within our intellect all of the access that we need to all of the solutions and answers, all of the guidance and direction that we need. The challenge is to be directed by our inner self and to allow the inner self to fully connect with the presence of God. When that union takes place, we will be guided and directed, self-directed by the divine presence and power of God. A last ingredient to building self-confidence relies upon our ability to get out of ourselves and to make our circle of life larger than simply the small one that includes ourselves or our family or our immediate circle of friends. Help other people, connect with other people. It is better to give than to receive, and as we connect in the larger circle of life, then magnificent things begin to happen, and our self-confidence and self-esteem is built. We need to give up the fear of failure. We need to reject the rejection complex. We need to surround ourselves with positive, supportive people. We need to detach from the negative people in our lives, regardless of who they are. We need to censor our way of thinking and give up our negativity. We need to be self-directed and connected with the power of God, and we need to reach out and connect with other people. When we do these things, we begin the process of unfolding our own self-confidence and strengthening our own value as persons. We believe that you can be self-confident and have high self-esteem, and we believe that it is the will and the power and grace of God that you be so. And so we share these ideas with you to begin the process with you of changing the way that you think. We believe in prayer as a centering force and as a power that can bring us great peace in life. And so at this point in the program, we'd like to pause for a moment of reflection and prayer. Eternal God, we gather our hearts and minds together in the reality of your divine presence, and we know that we are and should be self-confident because your divine presence indwells us, guides, supports, and directs us in all ways. We know these things in the name of faith, in the name of hope, in the name of love. Amen.
That was a wonderful talk, and it's so important, self-confidence. I think that of all the attributes of human life, if we have self-confidence, we can go wherever we want to go.
But so many people limit themselves because they lack self-confidence and self-esteem. And of course, psychologists, as I said a few moments ago, psychologists and sociologists tell us that that is probably one of the greatest mental illnesses and psychological deficiencies that we have as a people. And I think it begins with the way that we raise children. We usually tell children no before we tell them yes.
Yeah.
We usually tell children that we want them to accomplish more even when they've done well. And that is a societal problem, especially in the West, but I think of all human species. And it's unfortunate. And as we begin the process of telling children at an early age, you can't do this, you shouldn't do this, and we make an emphasis on the negative, the positive aspects of life are simply stifled.
That's true, and we make overachievers of our children all too often, and they can't live up to that, and then they think they lose their self-confidence. And you know that most of the teenage suicides are those children who have been overachievers, the children who was the traditionally good child who did everything right, and they just can't handle all of that stress, so they give up.
Mm-hmm. And in today's religious communities, so often we see people teaching in the traditional way that to have self-esteem, to rely upon our own person and our own intellect and ability is in some way taking away from God.
Yeah.
And a lot of religious leaders talk today about humanism and secular humanism as though those two things are first connected and second bad. And we do live in a secular world, and it doesn't mean that we're going to lack spirituality in a secular environment. It may mean that we lack religiosity, but the human aspect of that teaching is really lost. And I think that is not in keeping with certainly the gospel message or what we interpret New Thought Christianity to be, because we believe that Christ Jesus taught us to be self-reliant and also that we are the persons that we should be. And as we become stronger persons, it doesn't detract from God.
That's right, and of course we teach that God is within each person, and there's the aspect of God, the monad, within. And so if God, and know ye not that your body is the temple of God, the Spirit of God dwelleth within. And so if we believe that way, then we must be very proud of ourselves because we are. God is a part of us. And I think people who believe that way do have more self-esteem. And self-esteem doesn't have to do with financial security. It doesn't have to do with a lot of things. It has to do with the way the person inside views himself or herself.
And our view of ourselves is many, many times lacking. And that it's sometimes surprising because we do see successful people, prosperous people, who, after we talk with them or view their life for a period of time, begin to see that they do lack self-confidence and self-esteem.
Very often, unfortunately, that is true. Years ago, I taught in a modeling self-improvement school. For 14 years, I taught in that school, and I taught their self-development classes, and we told them, study yourself, do all you can to change that which you wish to, and then forget yourself. And I think that's wonderful advice. I don't know whose idea that was. It wasn't mine. I just taught what was presented in the curriculum. But that's so wonderful because we need to do that. We need to study ourselves and do all we can to change whatever we wish to change about ourselves, and then forget it. And just be facing the world and thinking of the people around you instead of self. Mm-hmm. And people who are because otherwise people are too self-centered. And I think the people who are self-centered are those who lack in self-confidence, and I can look at my own childhood in that respect. I was thinking of myself, how do I appear to others? How do I appear to others is enough. And then I would be very self-conscious. And I've subsequently learned that those people are very self-centered. We need to get outside ourselves and reach out to others.
And one of the things that you just outlined is one of the points that we talked about, and that is that as we do this, as we rely upon the judgment of others and listen to the judgment of others, then we're constantly living up to someone else's expectation. We're not living up to our expectation. We're not fulfilling our purpose in life, and we're being less than the persons that God created because of it. And so often we do seek the acceptance, but we listen to the judgment of others. And so many, unfortunately, have been told by family or friends or spouses or those around them that they're dumb, that they're limited, that they lack the ability to do things. And a lot of that is transference from the person who is sharing the information. But if the one receiving it accepts it and embraces it, then we have two lives that begin the process of destruction.
That's right. I have a friend who's a medical doctor whose young son was not studious, and he didn't care very much about grades. And he tested out his IQ at 105, she told me, which shocked me because certainly he's a very bright young man. And now he's in his late 30s and employed very profitably and doing exceptionally well in his life. But she was so despairing. Her husband is also a doctor, and they were both very despairing, and the father more than she. And they thought, what a terrible thing that this son is not ever going to be able, and they were both doctors, but they were thinking of how it was a blight on their own persona. So he tested later at 125, and I think those IQ tests should be banned because that young man is bright. I know him, they're my friends, and he's as bright as any average person, or brighter than most average people. And I have no idea what his IQ would measure today, but that's the sort of thing I think that makes for lack of self-confidence when just one thing happens and then everyone feels that it's a hopeless case.
Or in the case that you were just sharing with us about, if we take an IQ test and believe it's the end all, and certainly some people believe that. I don't think psychologists or psychiatrists or mental health specialists do any longer, but many people believe that. The other thing that people do in their lives with children so often is they get a report card, or they get a test result, or they get a university rejection in terms of some school that they want their child to go to, and they accept that as such an immovable obstacle of life, and they impress that upon the child, and then the child or the other person begins the process of believing that, and the cycle is set, and it's horribly damaging.
But then we can go the opposite direction and think of self-esteem over much, which I think is being done in the schools today. They're concentrating more on self-esteem than they are the 3 R's.
We need a balance.
Yes.
We definitely need a balance. But the aspect of self-esteem and self-confidence coupled with intellect is a process that brings us to the understanding of life that we need to have. But without the self-confidence and without the self-esteem, it's very, very difficult for people to function.
Yes, but also we can't put people in a mold. We can't say that everyone's supposed to do this and this and this, because it's just like people who are born in different signs of the zodiac. I happen to think that astrology is very interesting because usually you can see that the person who's born under a specific sign does have specific attributes that are attributed to that sign, and we know that people are not all the same. So if we try to put any child into a specific mold, unless they happen to fit that mold, then they're going to feel out of place and they're not going to feel comfortable with themselves.
Sure.
So we need to trust that and honor their own individuality.
And we need to remember, after all, what life is about.
Yes.
Life is our learning experience for our soul.
Yes.
And our spiritual growth is taking place. And so if we're here, in fact, we certainly believe that we're here to expand our spiritual reality and understanding, to unify ourselves more fully in understanding with God. If we lack self-esteem and if we lack self-confidence, then the attainment of the lessons that we need are tremendously impacted.
Yes, and we need to remember that. And again, know ye not that you're the temple of God. We need to feel that God's self within. We need to feel our attunement with God the whole. And we need to have, and whatever our spiritual proclivity, then we need to honor that and know that there's more to us than just a physical body. Because it's obvious that we have a soul body. It's obvious we have more bodies than just that which is visible.
And we need to build upon or improve upon the religious traditions that so many people have come up in that teach the depravity of humankind and teach the separation of God from human beings. And so often from Sunday school or catechism or wherever we learned our foundation teachings, and then again up through the churches that many people belong to, there is that belief that we're not worthy, the unworthiness of all human beings. And that simply pushes down again on our self-esteem and on our self-confidence. And
that is such a tragedy and so non-spiritual. I don't know how they come up with that idea, but I know that you're correct. It is prevalent.
Well, one of the fundamentals of the Reformation in the Protestant, in the Christian tradition, but in the Protestant tradition, is the building of the idea of the depravity of humankind and the fact that we are by nature, by spiritual nature, deprived and that we are separated from God. And it goes back in theology to even the concept of the fall of Adam, where we talk in traditional church circles so much about original sin and the fact that that original sin moves forward from generation to generation. And certainly there are theological theses and ideas that have been written about that, and we're not here to necessarily argue with anyone, but we are here to say that New Thought doesn't build upon that. It doesn't build upon the thought that we inherit sin from other generations or that we're separated from God because of what someone else has done. That's not our teaching at all.
I know, and that's so wonderful and so helpful. And once I ask in meditation, what is the original sin? What is that description? And what came is that it's man's failure to accept the divine within himself. And I think that's, I haven't come up with a better answer than that. That came to me about 30 years ago. And and that would be very clear.
Sure. If we look at the Genesis story, if it is to us a story not of a literal happening, but of the birth of life and of our spiritual being, not only for Adam and Eve, but for all of us. One of the things that we believe and teach is that the interpretation of the book of Genesis, when it speaks about creation, creates the Adam and the Eve, which is the masculine and the feminine concept of our duality of all people, and that the Garden of Eden is the habitation of peace and the place where God created us and brought us into being. And then when we read that story and we take it out of the context of being about Adam and Eve happening eons ago, and we look at it as being our birth, they begin by eating of the tree of knowledge. And when we eat of the tree of knowledge, sometimes that knowledge is of the physical world. It's not of the spiritual world. And so we then cast ourselves out because of the knowledge that we have, which is perverted. And that idea of being separated from God is certainly a perversion. And it's a perversion that damages self-esteem, damages our self-confidence, and damages the relationship that we already have with God. We're already one with God. God would never separate himself from us. And if we're wise, we would never separate ourselves from God.
Yeah. Well, I know that you teach to honor individuality in people. And that is so important because what makes one person feel defeated would make another person feel wonderful. So we need to honor that individuality in every human being. And if we do, then we allow that person to grow according to his own or her own needs. And we each come in, of course we believe, you and I, in reincarnation, and we come in with these things that we're going to work through. So whatever it is we're going to work through in that lifetime, those challenges are presented. And as the challenges are presented, if we're not allowed to work through according to our own pace, then we fall into the lack of self-confidence.
And we have to allow others to endure and experience what they must experience. We share this teaching and we share the idea, but some people are not going to believe it. Some people are not going to embrace it.
And that's okay. We honor whatever they wish to believe.
And that's very important, that we honor what they believe and we let them experience what they need to experience.
And it's right, too. It's right. For them, it's right. It's right and good. There is no wrong if it's what they're meant to be exploring and doing.
And therefore, the people who are not of our faith or of our tradition or of our belief are not wrong, and we're not wrong.
Exactly.
It is that we are all on the pathway where we choose to be and where we believe we need to be, and in the whole process, the love and presence of God is with everyone.
Yes, growing back to God, each in our own individual way. That's,
Dr. Garlish, who was the founder of our ministry and church, used to talk so often about that life was unceasingly ebbing toward unity with God, and that has such a nice ring because it's an always forward movement. So wherever any of us are, we're moving forward.
Yes, and we have people who've come back in through channeling and in other ways through automatic writing and all different ways, telling us what life is like on the inner, and they tell us these things, that it's so important that we honor the individuality, as you were just saying.
Because really the individual is an expression of where they are in their relationship with God.
Yes.
And God is with them in the midst of every experience, wherever they are. So.
Yes, at that moment in time. And in the prior life, they had other things to work through. And in a future life, they'll have different things to work through. In this life, we have these specific things to work through, each in an individual way.
And we choose to be positive and affirming and to have self-esteem and to have self-confidence that allows us to build a relationship with God. And we share that with others.
And to allow others to assume their own self-responsibility. That's so important, that we not take away their right and privilege for self-responsibility.
And as we allow them to go their own way, we do it in respect and we do it in mutual love, even though it may not be the way that we believe.
That's right, but we can detach from that aspect and just cheer them on in their own endeavors.
And all of that strengthens us and it strengthens them, and it makes life a much more positive and uplifting experience. Reverend Freelander and I have been sharing with you some concepts in self-reliance and self-confidence. And wherever you come from in your faith tradition, whatever church you belong to, what we invite you to do is to change your way of thinking, to be self-confident and connected to the power and grace of God. We look forward to seeing you next time.
Dynamic power helps me be strong. Confident living comforts my heart. From such a blessing I can't depart. Confident living helps me expand visions of value, the kingdom at hand. Confident living, talent to win, gift of the Spirit moves from within.